Oi, gente, a gente já está para começar. Um lembrete, né? A palestra que vai ser em inglês, a gente vai ter tradução simultânea. Então, se você preferir, acho que consegue lá rapidamente pegar um fonezinho se você não tem ainda.
I'll try to go slow.
E aqui a gente está na sala 2, que é a sala que a gente está fazendo em homenagem ao Alan Turing. E ele era um matemático britânico, né? Que duas coisas que ele fez seriam muito importantes, que é a participação dele na derrota da Alemanha na Segunda Guerra Mundial e a criação do computador. E ele foi responsável por quebrar os códigos secretos usados pelos nazistas durante suas comunicações e também por inventar uma máquina que serviu de referência para a criação dos modernos computadores digitais. E apesar da genialidade, o Turing, por ser gay, foi torturado e se suicidou. Esse fim da história é um tanto pesado, mas é importante para a gente lembrar da importância do que a gente tem feito por representatividade e diversidade. Então, sei que acaba um pouco pesada, mas é por um motivo para a gente sempre lembrar disso, tá bom? A gente vai ter agora a palestra com o Joe Yoder, que é Being Agile About Architecture. A gente vai ter esses próximos 50 minutos com o Joe aqui. Joe, bem-vindo.
Okay.
Welcome, Joe.
Olá, bom dia. Tudo bem? Oops. Excuse me. Okay. 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 So, hola, good to see everybody. Sorry, my Portuguese is not so good. I know a few words. I can order water. But, hey, an important word, right? The most important word in Portuguese on Friday, right? Sistol. Right? TGIF, and hopefully you've had a good conference. I'm so happy to be here. I can't describe my feelings. It's indescribable joy, is what I would say, because last time I was at this conference was 2019 in Belo Horizonte. And then I was actually in Sampa working at Nubank and some Paxaguru and some other stuff right before the pandemic. And I almost got stuck here, but which would have been a good place to get stuck. But it was, I caught one of the last flights home. It was surreal because no traffic in Sampa. I could walk in the middle of the street, but I was so sad, And it's been a rough couple of years, so I'm so happy to be able to come and participate and be in Brazil because I have so many friends. And so I want to thank the program committee for accepting and coming down here. But let me tell you a little bit about how I got here. So 6 months ago, a friend of mine, Grazi, who's here from Sampa, did her PhD on managing technical debt, and she's at INSPER in Sao Paulo, Sampa, right? And she visited my university, where I'm at, not my university, but a university in my city. It's where I did my graduate work, but I'm no longer affiliated there, but I did a lot there. And I said, Grazi, welcome. She came. I felt like she's coming to see me, but she also had an affiliation. I took her around. We were having coffee at my favorite coffee shop in Champaign, Illinois, Champaign-Urbana. And I said, Grazi, Agile Brazil might happen in person this year. I know some of the organizers like Ceci or Erica and some other people, and I saw some of the messages. I said, I think the deadline's almost here, and I really need to come to Brazil. You've shown me that it's okay to travel again. And so why don't we put in a submission, and if it gets accepted, I'll go ahead and make Brazil my first trip out of the U.S. since the pandemic. And lo and behold, they accepted us. For those of you that attended our workshop on Wednesday, I have a few QR codes if any of you want to take pictures. But there's all the materials from what me and Grazi did available. And it was a fun workshop. We had a really good time, lots of good participation with that. So thank you, Grazi, my good friend Grazi, for helping motivate me. And now I've been able to come back and be part of this, okay? So today I'm going to talk about which often you don't hear at Agile conferences. Agile architecture. Ooh, isn't Agile about the people and other stuff? What are you talking about architecture? or, systems or development. Well, that originally, Agile started by the technical people back in the late 90s and into which I'm kind of old. So I was involved. I was doing extreme programming in the 90s in Scrum before there was the Agile Manifesto. And a lot of those ideas were us technical people trying to do a better job and bridge the gap between adding value for the organization and let's help with the people. So that's part of it, but it was always, the early Agile conferences in the U.S. always bridged. One thing I really like about Agile Brazil is they continue to keep that focus with that. It's important. Technology is important in our technical things that we do. And so another way of looking at this is if I'm being Agile and I'm developing the architecture, how to have just enough architecture, plan appropriately without overthinking it, and how it fits into Agile. So I've written a lot of patterns, which you're going to hear Lula talking about at the keynote. He's been influenced a lot by patterns later today, my good friend Lula. And so I collaborated with Eduardo Guerra, who formerly from Brazil, but now he lives in Italy. He was supposed to go at the beginning of the pandemic. He got delayed a year, but him and his family are there. And Rebecca Wurstblock, I've worked a lot with Rebecca. She did the first DD. So responsibility-driven design, before there was test-driven design or domain-driven design, Rebecca Wurstblock was that. So part of the theme of when I go through this that I want you to keep in mind as I go through this, values drive practices. So what we do and what we value are tied in. So if I value music and all my musician friends, I've got quite a few musician friends here in Brazil, they practice and experiment all the time. There's my friend Rebecca Wurstbrock, who was into running marathons, and her daughter's also running marathons a lot. She's constantly practicing and going through. Even when I brought her here to Brazil and we were doing some work down here in Brazil, still in the morning she would get up, she kept in training. And there I am with one of the Fearless Change authors. You have Linda Rising and Mary Lynn Manns. Mary Lynn Manns likes to dance a lot. So do I. I may not be good, but I like to dance. And so you experiment and you try things. And Mary Lynn Mann is doing Zumba-type dancing regularly. So what we value drives our practices. And if our practices become regular, they can become kind of like patterns. And I'm from the patterns community. I evolved from the architecture and patterns group from the University of Illinois in the early 90s. And I was working with the Gang of Four, one of the co-authors, Ralph Johnson. And we started the patterns conferences with that. So I'm talking about Agile and architecture. Maybe I should at least tell you what I think Agile is. Because there's a lot of different thoughts. You ask, well, Agile is this. Is Agile doing Scrum by doing stand-ups and sprints and the way you plan, the way we bring things around, and we have are we going through things correctly? Are we looking at the burn-down chart? Is Agile a process? And the Agile Manifesto has some good things, but it's pretty abstract in a sense, but a good foundation. And then you even have the Agile principles, with the number one principle being focused on, where you're doing continuous delivery of value to the organization. It's never about going fast or what's our burn down chart or things. It's, are we going the right direction, and are we able to adapt and be flexible? So for me, Agile is always about inspecting, learning, and adapting as needed. It's about doing what works best for the team and the organization that we have, continuous improvement, trust, transparency. Let's put things out, and I can only fix what I can see, so let's make things apparent and visible, and let's encourage people to experiment and try things and try experiments. And it's not a failure if we learn from it. So we try this, and this worked well, this didn't work so well, so we know not to go that direction. And always getting that constant feedback and redirecting as we go. And so, Agile is not a process. many Agilists use a process. So let me repeat that. Agile is not a process. So I'm a co-author on a book for Scrum. We wrote 96 patterns on how to get the best out of Scrum. But Scrum doesn't make you agile. You can be very rigid doing Scrum. Ooh, we're stuck. We always have to do the stand-ups exactly like this. If I'm doing Scrum the same a year from now, the way I am today, with the same whatever, then I haven't learned. Part of it is learning and learning how to what make best. And so if I'm doing Scrum with these group of people, we might adapt how we do it to work best for us. Then I come over and I'm doing it with another group of people and I join the team for whatever reason. It's going to be a little different, and that's okay. There'll be some core principles there, but it's a process. So I'm going to present a lot of patterns. So I should at least tell you, I wrote these patterns with my co-author, and I'm going to have some QR codes later for you to snap that you can download all these different patterns that we've written based upon experiences from working with companies. But let me tell you, at least since I come from the patterns community and I'm also involved with the educational not-for-profit that promotes the pattern conferences internationally, including here in Brazil, Sugarloaf Plop, because the first one was in Rio de Janeiro, even though we've had it all over Brazil and Chile and Argentina. But what is a pattern? Patterns can be thought of as good practices, proven solutions to repeating problems. I'm an engineer, so we like to think problem solving. But it's not always problem solving. What if I'm designing something, a GUI, or we have patterns for bringing change into an organization, fearless change patterns. We also have patterns for doing good designing good user interfaces. Well, I'm not solving. I can cast it as a problem, but you could think I'm being creativity. But there's proven techniques or proven practices to repeating situations. We're really capturing the knowledge of experts or people that's done this over and over again, and we're trying to capture and share that. And that's what the patterns community is all about. I call it anti-patent. It's more like, because patents are, ooh, this is mine, let me hang on to it, right? Whereas patterns are, let's share, let's help uplift each other and give back, which fits in well. In fact, let me tell you something. Out of the patterns community in the 90s, almost all the signatures on the Agile Manifesto were part of our patterns community. They all evolved from that community because that's what it was about that giving. Let's help giving and receiving and help uplift each other. So it embodies equality. By the way, you can go to thehillside.net if you want some information on that. I'll put that back there once again. I meant to put a QR code on this one, but hillside.net is easy. But it's just, and we have a free conference. We have free little things going on about all kinds of topics all year. So come and join, and you can hear more about patterns. I'm sure you'll hear some more later today from Lula, right? Because he's excited about it now. He's doing all kinds of things along that lines. So, are we ready to get started into I've given you my thoughts on Agile, how I got here, and I've also given you a little bit of feel on what I think about Agile. So let's look at Agile architecture. So we ready to go? Let's go. Bora Bora. Okay. So even though you can do some of these first patterns anytime, but if you're starting something new, there are some patterns that we wrote about that you can think about while you're an Agile team, and you have to think about the architecture. What are some things you can do? So nowadays, things are very challenging. Things are constantly changing. Should I be doing big data, IoT? Everything's becoming interconnected. The apps are always evolving. New requirements all the time with new technologies. How do I balance all this stuff? How do I, and you know, it's not about going really fast, it's about doing the marathon. So you want to be able to, you know, if you go real fast, you'll burn out ultimately. We have to sustain it and be able to balance that with, we still want certain qualities and we want a good architecture because otherwise that'll slow us down and we'll be less agile. Architecture I've been involved with some different organizations where the architecture became a little bit what I'm best known for, big ball of mud, right? I'm a co-author on that paper, is if you're not careful, you can end up with a big ball of mud, and then that's going to make it very hard to make those changes. So how do you balance that? And so how do we get into the project quick enough, being agile, and getting the feedback? So what you do is to start the project, you climb on the shoulder of giants. So what is that? Really what that's saying is we build on well-known reference architectures we have to make some architectural decisions. Maybe what databases, technology. Are we going to do microservices? You know, we're going to have containerization. What kind of things? Like I did some work at Nubank, and they published all this and talked about it a lot, but they use like Clojure and Datomic, right? And they use a well-known hexagonal architecture that Alistair Coburg talks about, and they it's a modified version of it with ports and adapters. But what you want to do is build on that reference architecture. Here's an example, and I'm not trying to promote Microsoft. It's just an example of this. Say we were doing something with Microsoft, and we were doing the Azure Internet of Things. We could take the current things, and we can kind of build on top of that our architecture as we're building. And then, so whatever we're using, whether it's we're building, even when I was at Paxaguru and they were doing a lot of Java, originally they had a Java system and they were evolved the monolith to microservices. A lot of steps they took there, they had to build on some proven technologies. So we start with that. Now, so we have to make these early architectural decisions, but we want to validate them, and we want to know where the risky areas are before we start. We need to at least do a little bit of thinking. Are there areas that might be painful? If at Nubank, you know, they had their, you know, they really grew fast, and then they went public, right? And that changed things. And when you're dealing with money, which I've done a lot of banking software, working at places like Paxaguru and PagBank and Nubank and Itaú Bank, but I've also done a lot of medical software. And when you're dealing with that, things such as security, reliability, certain qualities are important. And if you're going to really grow, you need to, like Nubank did and Paxaguru did too, tremendous growth between 2015 and 2020 when I was working for them. Their growth they were more than doubling or quadrupling every year, and not only in the size of teams, but the number of transactions and the type of business. They were being successful. A good problem to have, but it was challenging. So you have to be aware of these things and take some of this information and use it so that you know how to deal. When should we deal with this? So you want to plan for responsible moments. Now, Agile says, oh, don't overthink it. Don't do analysis paralysis, right? But it's important to kind of think about your plan and how to adapt to that. So me and Rebecca Wurzbach wrote up this pattern, Plan for Responsible Moments. Is there certain things you think of what's going on? Is there areas where we should think about security? When should we think about security? Maybe not right at first, because we need to kind of build up the core platform to see what it's going to be like and experiment. But we don't want to wait till the last possible moment. So in Agile, you always hear people say, oh, delay all decisions till the last responsible moment. Have any of you heard that? Many in Agile? I see many hands. Well, unfortunately, that usually gets misinterpreted to be the last possible moment. And so I've been part of teams that's done that, where we're going along and, ooh, let's put this out there now, but hey, security's important. So they're adding security in, we're frantic, we're working real hard, and it has a tendency to tear up your system as you're doing it. You're creating a lot of technical debt because the system was not designed. First you were proving the concept, and then after you prove the concept, then all of a sudden you have to hack it in, but one concept you hadn't thought about was security. I had this when I worked Caterpillar, the big earth-moving company, Caterpillar. They were funding a lot of my research, and I was doing a financial modeling system. And some of the people there were so happy. It's like, wow, let's put this into production now. It's like, oh, wait, this is financial information, security. So then we had to refactor the system for security. And in fact, because of that, I wrote the first security patterns. Not that I'm a security expert, I'm not. But I shared our experience, our war stories, the pain of what it takes and things you need to think about if you have to have security. And it's actually referenced more than my big ball of mud just because it was the first security patterns, but not because I'm a security expert. And it's just, but once again, had I known that earlier, it would have made it less painful for us to do that. On the other hand, I was able to learn a lot about refactoring a system because I'm known for refactoring and making code clean with that. So when you're doing this, it's important to think about that. So when you're making your roadmap, it's a rough adaptive roadmap. It's a plan. So what you can qualify the roadmap with architectural decisions, especially things that are risky for your company, and you think, where should we do this? And at least you have indicators. Because of NDAs with different companies, I can't show you a real roadmap from some of those, from companies I've worked with, but you can see here, for example, maybe we're going to go to we want to move out to the cloud, and we want to check out the Apple version, and we want to look at the architecture for as we're going with this, as we evolve. So somewhere you can think of that, but being Agile also says, sometimes it might be we don't know, so our roadmap says experiment, learn, and then come back. So we want to plan for responsible moments. So we've gone along. We've started. We're going to start the project. We haven't quite started into our sprints yet. We're figuring out what architecture we're going to go with. It might even be architecture we've already been using in the company that we're comfortable with. We're going to make sure we know where the risky areas are. Make sure our roadmap, and we're thinking about the responsible moments to do this, not the last possible moment. But ultimately, we want to validate that this is going to work. So then we can kind of start building a little bit of a prototype, and that might even help influence some of our responsible moments as we go through this. So this is what our tracer bullet patterns is. Our tracer bullet pattern really says, okay, we kind of got an idea, but let's kind of start building kind of a working prototype, and let's get back. Is it going to meet our requirements? Maybe it's good enough for this, but security's got a problem, so we might need to enhance it and have something else here for the security side. So we're really trying to validate some of our decisions. So it's that feedback loop that Agile has. We're not going to overthink this. We're trying to get that feedback as we go through this. And then, okay, are you with me? Let's go. Then we and I love this pattern, by the way, and especially since I've worked a lot with Eduardo Guerra, because he wrote a book on test-driven development here in Portuguese as well. But it's a lot easier to test a system if you build in the ability to be able to test and validate your system early on, rather than wait till the end and then try to refactor or put a lot of tests back in the systems after it's been deployed. So make the architecture testable. Maybe you have hook points. If you're going to have microservices, you have hook points or places where you can go in and test the valid business rules as you go. Okay? Legal? Beleza? We're okay? Okay. And by the way, once again, you can build this test architecture, and they can both validate each other as you're building this kind of prototype, kind of working it. So, and then now you've even built something that the other team members know how to test. Your new team members, that when they start really getting into the sprints, they have a foundation, a good reference, and a template, and how to use the system, and what the core architecture is. I know that when I worked at Nubank, they did a lot of work on this with the platform and stuff, and they had testing. They built a lot of the core pieces in. New people come into Nubank, there's a lot there, and it's easier to share the knowledge of kind of a working type system. And so they're able to come into the teams and become part of the teams much quicker. And then they were using, I don't know if they still do, because it's been a couple years since I've really participated with that, is they were using things like mob programming and some good sharing of knowledge through some online documentation. But documentation only goes so far. The working system is also a great documentation in what kind of platform you have, and the testing, and how we should put things together. And it gives them the flexibility for adaptive requirements. One of my friends inside Nubank says one nice thing about the way that their architecture and platform is if they move to a new group, and if a problem happens, because it's consistent the way they deal with bugs and look at things and take care of things, they're able to real quickly move into that new group and adapt to what's going on. So these are the things, so build a test architecture. In fact, this would make my good friend Kent Beck happy. We would get thumbs up from Kent, right? By the way, I'm working on getting Kent Beck here. We were talking to him before. We actually did get a thumbs up from him for some of the things that happened yesterday here at Agile Brazil, but we're trying to get Kent down here. But Kent would definitely, coming from extreme programming and TDD and things along clean code, Kent Beck would definitely give us a thumbs up with that. So these can be done throughout the project, okay? Now, you don't not only do those at the beginning of the project, you can still also do those throughout the project, because you might need to make some adaptations and changes. You know, Paxaguru, as they were growing, their project was real successful. Now they had to kind of move to microservices to continue with their growth, and made some business decisions and technical decisions to continue with the agility of the organization. And you really needed kind of that agile mindset, but technical decisions influence their agility. Now these other ones are once you really get into heartbeat, you'll be doing these a lot, the second set of patterns, okay? Am I going too fast? I got my friends here, let me know if I go too fast. Plus I know I have translation going on in double translation. I admire that. Anybody that can do double English to Portuguese to sign language, I have to, my hat's off to you, right? That's very challenging. So let's go through during the project, okay? So we've got something going on. Maybe we were even in the middle of a project and we had to make changes, and so we applied some of these. Now we're getting into the heartbeat of the project. The Agile teams are getting the requirements, and we're going along. How does architecture still fit in with that in architectural decisions, being Agile and still having architecture? So here, when we're planning for different architectural tasks, sometimes might come up. We might need to try something new. And so one of our patterns is you can put architecture in the backlog. Yes, we can. We can actually have, like, okay, security. We have a security requirement. Sometimes it cuts across a lot of stories. It might be the integration and the communication between different Agile teams, and there's some Agile coaches maybe helping different product owners, possibly, depending on your organization and how big it is. And so we can add some of these things in there, and even things such as technical debt. So you can add backlog items for technical debt and quality-related architecture work. Yes, you can. Yes, we can, right? It's okay. We can do it. And in fact, Philip Cruchin, he's got a good publication on this. And he even talks about ways of colorizing the backlog. And I didn't put a QR code on this one, but if you just Google Philip Cruchin and colorizing your backlog, you'll find many different references on this. But you don't have to use these colors. You're being Agile, the team gets to decide what adds value. And they get to change it as they go, as we learn, right? That's the Agile mindset, like my good friend Linda Rising always talks about, trying to use that mindset. So, sometimes there's things that come up, new requirements, and the system is growing so fast. I remember this definitely happening inside Paxaguru a lot. They were growing so rapidly, they needed some triggers to let them know ahead of time, before Black Friday or before they run out of database space, what's going on. So sometimes we need some triggers. And so what you do is rather than waiting until the problem happens, let's think ahead. It's almost like fire prevention. Let's put a few little sprinkler systems in, or let's put some things in to give us warning if we're reaching the load and we're getting close. So it's not a problem yet, but we can see, wow, the performance is still okay, but man, if we keep going and we keep growing like this, by 6 months, there's no way we're going to be able to satisfy the requirements. And so therefore, it's going to cause a lot of problems with the teams. They're going to be unhappy, the people. And we're not going to be able to be as agile business-wise if we don't deal with this. We'll be frantic. We don't want to wait till Black Friday to do this. I remember at Paxaguru, Black Friday was an important day. In the U.S., it always happens after Thanksgiving, but everybody wants to go to and buy stuff. And that was a big selling day at Paxaguru. So all hands on deck. So you want to make sure that you're prepared. And so here there might be some quality attributes that are kind of going the wrong way. So then we can re-examine the architecture and think about having this. We're not looking at micro things. This is more big picture from the architecture. You'll still have some things checking. The teams will have, I want to keep my code clean. I want to see if I have enough test coverage or code smells, big methods. So I might still have the normal sonar things, but there might be some bigger architectural things you can add here. Okay? And then sometimes this might lead to, we need to do a spike solution. So the architecture was great for the last 6 months or 6 years. But now we're growing so fast, maybe we need to go and do an experiment. It's kind of like an XP spike, but not as, that's really focused more on a specific implementation. It's more from a higher level thing. And by the way, when you do a spike, it might create new tasks, because we do a spike solution, and we say, ooh, it'd be good if we start using this data. Maybe we need big data now, and we need to move to that. So we might need to put new tasks into the backlog as part of the team, and that needs to tie into the business value with the product owner, and we need to make sure we're communicating this clearly, how it ties into the value of the organization and the team. So here we might do some solution investigation, comparing new technologies. This was exactly done with Paxaguru when they decided in 2015, wow, our system was great up for the last 10 years, but now it's really harder to change. And we're growing so fast, maybe we need to think of a new type of technology. Or, will microservices help? There's some hype out there about microservices. Martin Fowler wrote, some stuff with some other people from ThoughtWorks. Sounds cool. And us technical people, we always want the new shiny thing, right? Let's go do it. But is it really good for the organization, and will it work? So they had somebody there. Panda might remember, because I was working with Panda there too, but Diego, he went off and he was experimenting with a couple. So we kind of had a small team or a couple people. Let's do some spikes. What is this? How does it work? And it really worked well. And so these are not as tactical as an XP design spike. You really need to, if you're going to be agile about it, let's make it bounded. It might go up to a sprint, but we're really looking at different solutions. It's like let's step back, let's get together, do some thinking about this, and then re-examine it. Now, for the people that attended the workshop on Wednesday, they know me and Grazi did a whole bunch on this with this technical debt management. So if you don't manage technical debt, and even Ward Cunningham talks about this, you'll get into a place where you're no longer agile, and your teams is constantly just churning and churning. You can still do the agile process, but the business agility has gone way down. The team is not even happy anymore, and is causing a lot of problems. So managing that technical debt, which might mean you even prioritize some decisions to change the architecture or fix some code issues within the backlog as part of your process because it's going to help in the long term. The problem is sometimes everybody's short term, especially a lot of the management or the product or the external forces. Give it to me now. I want it now, right? Instant gratification. And he's like, well, wait, if you wait, we'll be able to do an order of magnitude better in 6 months but we got to slow down a little bit first. So some dirt, and this is like a kitchen. I had a friend that was a master chef. If you keep the kitchen clean, you can sustain it. Ward Cunningham, if any of you have not heard of Ward Cunningham, have you heard of wikis? Wikipedia? He was the inventor of Wiki. Wiki is fast moving. But Ward Cunningham talked about this in 1992. He coined the term technical debt, is every time we're working on, we're creating a little bit of a mess as we're evolving, which that's natural. A cook does that. But if we let it get out of control, it can have serious ramifications. Some debt is okay. You might make tactical decisions. We need the feedback from the customer. Let's put it out there, see what you say, and then because that might tell us to go a different direction. But if we let that debt keep piling up, it's just like at any bank. In the U.S., we had the banks too big to fail in 2008. Bad debt is a problem. Same way with our systems. So we need to deal with it, including other types of debts, quality or test debt. So this is about values. Does a team value that? And do they realize that it influences our way to be agile with our systems as well? By the way, a lot of work's been done by my good friend Grazi, and this is also Alfreda Goldman, professor. She did her PhD with him, and I became good friends with her. Her thesis has a lot of companies inside Brazil and lots of details, so there's a QR code if you want to check that out. And by the way, on the last slide, I'll have a QR code to these slides. So if you missed a QR code, I'll give you a meta QR code. I'm kind of a meta guy too, so. And just to think about how this influences agility, I heard a real interesting talk of quite a few years ago at a software architecture conference by Chris Richardson, who also wrote a lot of the microservices patterns. When we're thinking about qualities, everybody's used to these types of we call them the ilities. They're usually cross-cutting. It's like scalability, security. That's why we call them ilities in the U.S. a lot of times. But it's like these quality requirements. But there are certain quality requirements that affect your team's development velocity. These are not things that are always seen by the customer, so they don't understand them quite so well. But the team needs to be able to work collaboratively with the product owner. When you're dealing with maintainability, evolvability, testability, and deployability, those things, if you're not paying attention to them, can definitely slow down the team's velocity and make you so that you're releasing a lot of bugs and problems, unhappy teams, and thus less agile even, because you're not able to respond as well as you used to be. So thinking about those are important and making them visible. How can we improve what we cannot see? Thanks to my good friend Ceci for providing me this picture with a talk we did before the pandemic. I believe it was in Sao Carlo, but this is actually a picture from Nubank at the time. But I mean, they have things visible. What's going on with the systems and other things. And this will change depending on who you are. I also went to Spotify one time to visit Woody Zoll, the mob programming guy. He spoke at Agile Brazil, I believe in 2019. And we went to Spotify, and we were talking about different things. One thing I was impressed is they had a lot of visibility of what's going on. And in fact, we put it in our Scrum book as pattern 56, make things visible. We need this information. Sometimes it's digital, but sometimes it's not. Teams, we might create some things for the teams, what adds value. Sometimes it might be if I'm doing Java code and I want to keep it clean and I've got Sonar and I'm running across, is there big functions? So then the last pattern is we want to detect problems in the code and architecture. We can do what me and my good friend Paulo Merson talked about, is this continuous inspection. And that's where we keep a close eye and making it visible as what's going on. And really what this says is constantly, sometimes we cannot automate it. Sometimes we have to do it manually, but we should be looking at not only the system and the architecture, the running code, but let's make available to the teams, including the product owner and the managers and everybody, because we shouldn't hide anything. Let's get this feedback, and maybe the architecture, whoever was working on that, did a good job to start with, but now maybe they need the feedback to adapt it. And this should be available to everybody, on this. And to tie that together, if you really, I love this quote by Bill Gates. And I'll read it to you just in case you have trouble seeing it. But it says, the first rule of any technology used in a business is that automation applied to an efficient operation will magnify the efficiency. But the converse is true too. The second is that automation applied to an inefficient operation will magnify the inefficiency. So we wrote this as a pattern, automate as you go. It's too hard to automate way late in the game. We want to plan for responsible moments, so let's be building it in as we go. So there's things that, if you only do it once, why automate it? But if it's repetitive, if it involves lots of waiting, error-prone and tedious, this could testing, different quality metrics. I did a lot with the Agile quality, code smell detection. So let's automate that. Let's definitely help teams out with that, okay? And then, Uto Ricardo. And so we're using this continuous inspection, and it can feed back into a lot of things as we go, okay? So let me just kind of summarize it, and we'll bring it back to closure, because I know I went kind of fast because I had a lot of patterns. So before you start a project, or even while during, if you need to kind of re-examine, we want to build on proven technologies, or we have to make some technology decision. Nubank had to decide, are they going to have Clojure, or are they going to use Java or Ruby or Go? I don't care, language of your choice. It's just a language. We want to do the best. They made a business decision and used Datomic for doing all the transactions for the database, but it's got a nice history, which works well in financial or medical domain, because auditors, they want to know everything that happened and who did it, right? If you have TCU, right? Well, my good friend Paulo Merson works at TCU, so they might be the auditors coming and checking, or the central bank. And so know where your painful areas are, plan for where we should really deal with those responsible moments. And then we want to validate things and make the system testable as we go. So we definitely want to do that if we're starting something new, but even during a project, as we're kind of evolving, we can come back. Now, once we start going, as we're doing our normal product backlog, which has the visible features, there might be some invisible features that we can put in the backlog, including even technical debt. And we might need triggers to even let us know where should we, when something is starting to move towards its limits and we need to re-examine it. Occasionally we might need to experiment and do some architectural spikes, which can help us adapt our plan, by the way. And we better be managing technical debt as we go, right? This is kind of fun. It's a little bit slow, follow out me some. But I think it's good for the translators because it slows me down, right? Because I can get passionate and I don't want to go too fast here. And then, of course, keep things visible as you go. Legal? Makes sense? So hopefully with this, I've given you kind of vision how you can be agile, you can have a sustainable architecture, still kind of start the project fast, and continue as you go. And let me, so I'm going to wrap it up now, I said early on, when you think of agility and architecture, wait a minute, how can we do this? Yeah, Agile is about the people side, but it never said not to do anything about the technical side as well. It said, yeah, we want good people, But it also talked about working software. That was in the manifesto. People forget about that. You know, and it's also about improving, not about going, you can go fast and not add value to the company. So you need KPIs and let me impress the boss and get my money based on that. I might be hurting the company. Sometimes fast velocity does not equal value. Productivity, I can produce a lot of mess, a big ball of mud quickly, right? But it doesn't equal value. So you need to balance between people skills and technical skills. And just let my good friend Mike Beadle, who unfortunately had a tragic thing happen to him a few years ago, he's been to Agile Brazil. He was the second adopter of Scrum back in the 90s behind Jeff Sutherland. He wrote the first patterns on Scrum back in the 90s. He's a signature on the Agile Manifesto. He wrote Enterprise Agility and Enterprise Scrum. He was one of the co-authors on that Scrum book. I worked with him on that. And just a few days before this tragic thing, I mean, in Chicago, unfortunately, you know, he was robbed and killed. You know, it's very sad. But just a few days before that, this is one of his last quotes from his social media. It might be his last quote. Agile does not cure incompetence, right? You can coach teams to be more engaged and collaborative, but no Agile framework, method, or mindset can save you from blatant failure if your development team is incompetent in basic engineering practices. Part of being Agile, technical excellence is a must. Paxaguru grew tremendously and changed it. The Agile mindset was part of it, but the technology helped them evolve and be very Agile as well. These are very important concepts. So I started out, values drive practices. What do you value? You know, do you value happy teams? I do. But I know as a developer, when I've been a developer or part of teams, we're a lot happier when we have good systems and we're able to experiment and learn, and we have some slack time to make sure we're improving and doing the right thing. Do you value good architecture? By the way, here's a whole bunch of the papers written on Agile quality from QA to AQ, being Agile at quality, and also on Agile architecture, and also for our continuous inspection patterns. Those are all available based on real experiences, so anybody that wants to QR code. And also, if you need to listen to more of this, I've been working with friends at e-Touring, and they have a lot of recordings from me I've done the last year because we're trying to uplift and share this knowledge. And you can go to their website for short videos, and I've talked about being Agile about architecture, many topics. I'm not getting any money out of it. I'm just doing to help out, but they probably have some cost for that. And I got them to agree to give a discount. Just use Agile 50 if you want for that. But either way, they did translate it, and I think they're very professionally done, and they're all translated. So let me just finish. I'm so happy to be here again in Brazil. As you can see, I've been coming out, and these are many friends that I've had for many years. Some new friends I've met here at this conference, but people I've known, and it's just good to be here and be able to touch and see people again. So I hope I'll have some time afterwards as well, but definitely look forward to doing all that, because to me the most important thing is about relationships in life and building good things and with that. And I've built many good relationships here in Brazil. So muito obrigado. A couple quotes, that bottom quote's from our big ball of mud paper. Hey, if you think good architecture is expensive, try bad architecture. Very expensive. And you can't fix what you can't see. By the way, I made a new friend here while I'm here. So Jessica, glad you're here. And she's a Java hacker and likes clean code and stuff like that. Gave her first talk the other day, right? Congratulations. And we went out with me and Grazi for dinner last night. So I posted this picture, and I said, I met a new Java hacker that likes clean code. Kent Beck gave the thumbs up. So that's what it takes to get Kent Beck here, right? We'll have to work on that. So it's unusual to be able to get Kent Beck to acknowledge something on a social network, right? Usually he just puts them out and wants you to acknowledge, right? But Jessica is almost famous, right? So, muito obrigado. I hope you enjoyed it. And if we have time, I don't know if we have time or not for one or two questions, but either way, I'll be afterwards. And so thank you once again. Chodibolo, right? And so hopefully we'll see you around. Yes, question up here. Right here. If you tell it to me, oh, there it works.
A gente tem tempo para uma perguntinha, talvez duas. Você pode perguntar em português à vontade. Eu posso colocar aqui, o tradutor vai fazer a tradução para o Joe também, tá bom? Vou preparar ele aqui.
Do we have time for one? Okay, over here, I guess.
I'll be fast. Whose responsibility is architecture?
Whose responsibilities?
I mean, who does architecture? You know, it's because it used to be a kind of a special thing before.
So, sorry, speaking to the mic.
It used to be a kind of special team,
Right,
or
right,
the
right,
architecture guys.
Oh,
that everybody
Right.
hated, right?
Right.
So now, how do you think architecture and you think in enterprise terms?
Right.
Whose job is that?
Yeah, thank you, and that's a great question. So I had to cut out a couple pictures because I knew for the sake of time I didn't want to go over because they're going to push us out real quick, which I understand. I've been part of that. Is you don't have an architect on an ivory tower usually. In many companies, such as Paxaguru, Nubank, or Google or whatever, they don't have architects. So you usually have some lead people. But it's the team's, it's all our responsibilities to pay attention. And usually you have some lead people that are paying attention. So when I was at Nubank, there was a guy named Lucas and Enrique I worked a lot with. And even though they didn't have the role architect, they were, you know, so usually there's, but other team, and you want to share that knowledge. So all team members, we all have to take a certain responsibility. But sometimes some people don't understand, so we need to communicate, make sure the business people know too. So that you're right, back in the day, there was a role. I'm the architect, right? But that's not so much. So, but anybody, even the new person coming in, hacking on the code says, Joe. So Jessica gets a hold of me, Joe, you made this architecture, but I have trouble adding this new feature. So she can help me. Oh, wait, I see I have a problem now. And so she's even responsible to let me know, and then maybe we need to fix it, you know, or evolve it, okay? So anybody can be responsible.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Obrigado, gente.
Thank
Não tem
you.
mais
And
tempo
I
pra
will be
nenhuma.
around afterwards, so anybody wants to talk.
Thank you. It's good to have you here again.
Oh,
So, see you
definitely.
next time.
Oh, Panda gave me this hat, and I showed up, I haven't seen him for 2.5 years, we're close, and I said, I have a gift for you. And he says, I have a gift for you. He gave me this custom handmade hat, and then he has the PLOP hat, Pattern Language of Programs. So thank you, Panda. Muito obrigado.